Hello, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, and welcome to another episode of Fanalysis Lite, Star Wars. I'm Reti4, this is Greyjedi 91,
Hey guys.
and today we're going to give Greyjedi a chance to do his own little look back on his matchup videos, similar to how we did, well, exactly as we did to Connor and Evan. So Matt, take us away with the list you've got for us today.
That's right. So I thought that I would take a very brief look back at three of my older matchups that I would change if I could. But after that, we're also going to get into a discussion, me and Callan here, about the highly contentious Darth Bane versus Jedi General Hoth video released by Evan Nova a few years ago, because that was a point of topic in the prior video that I couldn't be there for. And had I been there, I would have had some arguments to make. So today I get my time in the spotlight. But we'll start on my mistakes first, as opposed to your guys's. Anyway, so my first match that I went to that I would change, in fact I did change it. It's one of my very oldest videos. I didn't actually realize I'd been doing this for as long as I have. Plo Koon versus Kit Fisto, which I think is still up. And I checked the date on it. I'm not sure if it's a private video, if it's still public, but it was released in like November of 2010.
8 years.
I'm old. Anyway, I've been doing this for way too long. But anyway, this is the only versus video I've ever done that I actually took back everything I said anyway. There's a big annotation at the beginning of the video that basically says not to waste your time. So don't bother watching it. It's like 10 minutes long and it's poorly produced and just lame. But I stood by my conclusions in that video for a few years after I released it. And, spoiler alert, Kit Fisto won. These days, I believe Plo Koon would win. And the primary reason why this is because at the time, there was less information about Plo Koon. He got more exposure from the Clone Wars 3D series. You know the one I mean, the popular one from 2008 and onward, and also its tie-in material. If the fight between him and Ventress on Corm had been published, I certainly hadn't read it yet. So there was a lot less information about Plo Koon at the time. And as I consumed more of what there was available on him, my opinion of him definitely grew. And Kit Fisto, his viability, don't get me wrong, he's an incredibly skilled swordsman, but he's one of the characters that was sort of touted as one of the premier lightsaber duelists of the age, and to an extent he still is, inappropriately. But a lot of it had to do with what people term Mace's B team and the hype, because these people were assembled by Mace to challenge Darth Sidious. The implication being that they're the very best of the best. And while this may even be technically true with respect to their skill as swordsmen, at least on some level, they're not at all the most well-rounded fighters. And the more sources you familiarize yourself with, and the more you think about it for yourself, the scales to me just tended to slide in favor of Plo Koon a few short years after I made that video. So that's definitely one that I would recant, like, if I could. Plo Koon versus Kit Fisto is a waste of your time. Don't watch it, if for no other reason than because I don't agree with anything I say in that video. So that's number one. Did you have any thoughts on that, Callan, or do we move on?
Move on, really, because everything I had to say on it has already been covered, and like you said, it was pre-Corm fight, at least pre or wide knowledge of it, and there was really no standout feat for Plo in that regard. I mean, even now, it's pretty much his only standout, display of ability beyond what people just sort of refer to him as. And it's certainly a good one, but without that, I can definitely understand why you went for the original verdict.
There's loads of information about him, and always has been, about his reputation, but there was precious little until a few years, ironically enough, after I released that video about, that detailed his actual skill being put to use. So that was really the impetus behind changing my mind on that. And it's the only video that I've ever made by myself that I will change my opinion on. There are other videos I've made where I think I could have worded my position differently, or they certainly could have been better produced, better voiced, better edited, what have you, better written. But this is the only one that I've like done a complete about face, and just like I don't agree with it. So moving on from that one, Cedrus versus Darth Nile, which was a video I did with Evan Nova, and I want to say that at the time he and I just wanted to work together. I can't remember if we'd already done Darth Warlock versus Kyle Katarn, but I feel like we hadn't. I feel like that one came later. In any case, that was on his channel. We wanted something to go on my channel at the time, you know, just the way people do. You collaborate, you share material. And he and I, at the time, I do remember this. Evan used to make very short videos, you know, compared to Connor. Do you remember that, Callan?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, and my videos tended to be somewhere in the middle. I make probably the longest videos now, or like not on average, I would say. Maybe not. I certainly don't have the longest videos. But
yes, maybe Antoine and myself.
Right. But I have on average, my videos are usually somewhere around 50 minutes or so. But at the time, they were closer to half an hour, and our styles just didn't really mesh because what we got was something that, to me, was presented in a much too simplistic way. And even the characters, like I wanted to use Darth Nile personally because I'd had a lot of requests to do it. Even though I have my criticisms of the character, I think he's interesting because he's one of the few standouts of his time. That's the thing about the Sith of that era. It was such a cult-like homogeneity going on that every Sith was basically indistinguishable from the next, aside from him. I'm right down to his character design. He stands out. So I wanted to use him. And I already had used him on my own in an even more horrible video that I forgot about. I think I deleted it. So I wanted to use him. I wanted to feature him again. Anyway, the point is, it was like, who do I use him against? And Evan, I think he might have even gotten the idea from Connor. Like, they just decided to use Cedrus. And the result, Cedrus is a character I don't care about. And the result is the matchup is one that I don't have strong feelings about, didn't accordingly research as well as I could have. And while I'm not sure that I would change my opinion on it, I don't hold hard and fast to it. I haven't even seen the video in so long. I certainly don't have any passion, nearly as much passion for that project as I do for many of my others. So that's one that it's not so much that I think I need to change it. I probably, in retrospect, if you asked me today, I just never would have done it in the first place, you know?
I get that.
So there's that one. And then beyond that, like I said, the only other things I would change, there are videos I have done that I think could be of higher quality. But most especially Obi-Wan Kenobi versus Sora Bulk, which is my first, what I'm going to call modern versus video. It's the first one I ever did that lasted more than 15 minutes and was like properly
formatted.
Formatted, yeah. It was after, because I'm the original versus series creator, for whatever that's worth, because the original videos are shitty. But after Connor came along, he brought this format with him. And so it's the first time that I made a modern video. And while at that time, I believe Connor had already used Obi-Wan Kenobi, but no one had used Sora Bulk. And when you think about how many Sora Bulk matches there are now, it's kind of weird to think that my horrible, shitty analysis. Well, no, that's not true. I think it's a sound analysis for the most part. It's horribly produced. The voice work is terrible. The editing is terrible. I cannot actually rewatch the video. It's awful. Do not watch this video except to embarrass me. But anyway, just the idea that character's been featured so heavily in the time since. But yeah, that's a matchup that I've actually toyed with the idea of redoing it, even though I'm in two minds because, like, well, if people already know how I feel about it, will they really want to sit through it again? But it is so horribly produced that it shames me. But I don't. I wouldn't change my actual arguments that much. I don't think for that one, and that's pretty much it.
I think that's what matters most. The fact that the analysis was sound. That's what brought people to the videos in the first place. Yes, of course, the production quality was low. Of course, everything. I mean, you were still learning. You were the trailblazer of this kind of format.
It was really bad. Yeah.
And you didn't have
really
the equipment
bad.
apart from anything else. You weren't an editor. You know, you learned as you went
I'm
along.
not. My first good versus video, like in terms of, I was happy with the result, and it was popular and seen by a lot of people, and it was close to my current style, is also the first team battle. Not that I ever did. I think it's not the first team battle that I ever did, but it's the first good one that I ever did. It's Mace Windu and Obi-Wan Kenobi versus Darth Bane and Darth Zana, which was actually, and people have asked me this, how come you chose that grouping of characters? Because the person that initially requested that wanted Yoda and Mace Windu versus Darth Bane and Darth Zana, and I thought,
bit of a mismatch, that one.
Like, shall I scale this back, and make this a little more fair? So that's why it's Obi-Wan and Mace Windu instead.
I can still remember listening to that to this day. I remember where I was sat listening to that.
I'm happy with the impact it had, and I'm happy with a lot of the arguments that I presented. I'm happy with the way that the music works in it, but it's jarring to look at it now. Like if you watch it's not universally terrible editing, but there's some choices I made in there. It's like, what is he doing? Or like he thought somebody would want to watch this. I mean, it's just so choppy and weird. And it's a clear middle step between like my horrible videos and like where I am today, which is closer to where I want to be. A nice middle ground between celebrating the character's story and also providing a sound analysis of like what I think they're capable of.
Wrapped up in nice production quality.
Yeah, so that's my first one where I think I got close. It was like a middle step, but it's hard. I cannot rewatch that video. It's just weird. But the first video that I made that I'm like still like pretty much 100% happy with is probably Anya Kira versus Lucy and Dre. That to me is it was, I had the most fun working on it. I enjoy the character's story so much. I actually I was always going to do that matchup because of the theme of the two being these crazy Jedi teachers who made enemies in the forms of their former students, but in completely different ways, and how they're both redeemed in the end. They're both strongly redeemed and strong light side characters that got powerful endings to their stories. But I went into it to do a versus match, and I got a Lucy and Dre character profile out of it because I thought, oh, his story is so great too. I want to do a video just about his story, So when you enjoy what you're doing, it really shows.
It really does, because the Anya Kira and Lucian Dre video was the video for me. That was the one that sealed my absolute love of the format and the storytelling like potential for this kind of matchup design. That's my all-time favorite video of yours for sure. To this day, because the jump up in quality of the presentation and the power of the delivery was just not just between you. I don't mean just your old material, but all of ours. At that point in time, it was astronomical. It was really powerful video to watch, and I was like, okay, I want to do that.
I got pretty much universal good comments from that, and not just from people, not just from random people, but from like you guys, like my group of friends who also did it, so it's like, oh, this is cool. Like this one feels nice. So that to me, that's where I kind of cemented my style. Whenever I did that 3-4 years ago, something like that. But prior to that, you have like some really bad material, or at the very least, it's badly produced. So yeah, all this to say that I know I'm not perfect. The Grey Jedi is not perfect. But Grey Jedi has some issues. Seinfeld? George's parents, they celebrate this stupid holiday that they made up called Festivus, where it's basically an opportunity to celebrate how much I hate you or how much I hate the world. This is like, it's now time for that part of Festivus the airing of grievances. Um,
Levied
so I'm here
me
to.
because Evan and Connor couldn't be here.
You were the only one brave enough to show.
Well, to be fair,
Um,
they weren't available, but yeah.
they weren't. Yeah, yeah, no, that's a complete lie. I'm just having fun. But anyway, so we're here to get into a discussion regarding what is. It may not be the most contentious, but it's certainly one of the most contentious versus videos that Evan ever did, which is Darth Bane versus General Hoth. At the time that this, I just want to give a little backstory, and it's well known to Evan. I'm not telling him anything he doesn't already know. That I did not, never did, never will agree with the outcome of that video. I told him as much in a public comment that received a fair amount of thumbs up, in a very long laundry list of why I didn't agree with him. But the thing is, and I was happy to let it be. But the thing is that when it came up in the next, in the last episode of Fanalysis, the last Star Wars based episode that we had at any rate, because I'm not sure when this is going to be uploaded. He didn't. He responded as though he didn't agree with any of the criticisms I made. Now, I should make it clear, he didn't actually respond directly to me, but he touched on a number of points that I did bring up, and they apparently did nothing to change his mind. And to me, that reawakened a want or a desire to revisit the topic properly and present a case from the opposing side, because there wasn't that voice of dissent.
Yeah, because of the three of us that were available for that video, there was no opposing opinion because of our, or at least not a fully opposing opinion, because we all have a relatively shared view on Hoth as a character, and even regardless of that, there was a failure from all three of us to address the contrary points regardless. Even and I'll admit that, and I apologize for that to the viewers right now. We should have addressed the contrary opinions, or the potential viewpoints that were out there that we didn't agree with, and we just didn't, because when you have three people agreeing, it's sometimes difficult to dredge up the stuff that you're kind of putting aside because you don't agree with it, or because you don't think it needs covering, and that was just our bad. It was a poor presentation choice on our part. I covered a bit better on the Plagueis side of things, I think, but yeah, that was later in the video.
Yeah. I for the record, Greyjedi stands on Reti's side of the aisle when it comes to the Plagueis versus Obi-Wan thing as well. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. And largely because I think that you covered a lot of what I would have said as well in the video. Like that's the thing, is like you provided that opposite case, whereas no case was being made for Bane, which is why I am here. And full disclosure, Darth Bane is my favorite Sith Lord, but that is not the reason I vote for him. Okay, like this is not a popularity contest. This is not bias, and it's just an objective analysis of the evidence, and my conclusion is that he's been robbed. Victory would victory would be almost certainly his, is how I'm going to phrase that. And here I am to explain why I think that. And partially, the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to take a number of talking points that you guys raised, and some of my own questions that I have for you, and I'm going to bring them up and have that guide us through our little discourse. So are you ready to join me on this?
I am
Callan,
ready to be flattened.
Okay.
This is not the argument I would choose to defend on top of my list, but yeah, I'll do my best.
Now, so the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that I am not one of those people that thinks that Darth Bane would flatten Hoth. Okay, I'm not saying that this is a stomp for Bane. I am saying that when we ignore headcanon or speculation, if we just take the facts, there's almost nothing on Hoth. As far as something that can be directly observable, there's really very little. So to the point where that is not the most realistic view of the character. If you really take him at face value, he's a nobody, and that doesn't make sense. The truth has to be somewhere in the middle between the speculation and nothing. So we take what little, in his case, the way that this is often the delineation here is like some characters have more accolades than they do feats, and that's true of Hoth. Agreed?
Absolutely, yeah, without question.
And if anybody doesn't know, basically, Callan, you might be better at explaining the difference between accolades and feats. Do you want to take that one for any viewers?
Sure. Feats, in the context of this anyway, would be presented kind of evidence for stuff like matchups, where we see a capability of a character presented as just obviously there and present and proven and demonstrated. Whereas with accolades, it's more, we think this is lauded about this person. You know, this person was the greatest swordsman who ever lived, without us ever actually seeing it or having it kind of demonstrated in any way. It's how people in the era and maybe even throughout history talk about the character, and you kind of have to you have to take the like you say, the middle ground between that when it comes to delineating the actual facts.
Basically, if you really want to boil it down to like the simplest essence here, feats equate to accomplishments that we know happened. Accolades are more like speak to a character's reputation, right? So again, as somebody who has a lot more going on in the realm of his reputation than his actual feats, Hoth is somebody that one must speculate with him to come to the most reasonable conclusion to what he's capable of. And the reason why I'm highlighting this as the first point of discussion is because I don't want to come across like a hypocrite. It would be really easy for me to say, you guys are speculating. I speculate all the time in my videos. I know that. The difference is when I do it, I only do it when I feel like I have a strong reason to. And even though I'm going to give you all the opportunities, that should be afforded to you to try to prove it, I don't think you guys had very strong reasons for placing Hoth at the level that you did. But that's the reason I brought this up, is just a starting point, is because I didn't want to come across like a hypocrite. I know I speculate, but when I do it, I think I have firmer evidence and proofs with which to do that speculation. Any words before I move on?
Nope. Completely agree with everything thus far. The only reason we go to the extent I think that we do speculate with Hoth is the fact that there is nothing on him. Like we get nothing in the way of feats with this guy, with the exception of one that we'll discuss in a minute as one of the later.
We'll talk about it. probably a few minutes, guys, because it's a big point of discussion. Now, so the first thing I want to talk about, and I want to ask this of you specifically because. For those of you who are watching this who don't know, Callan and I have like a standing arrangement. We argue about twice a month for 8 hours at a time.
So, we're not exaggerating.
No, we're not. They're friendly arguments, friendly debates, but they just spiral out of control and they go on and on. But Callan is Mr. Tactics. Like he is the strategist. Like that's like his area of fascination, not just in fiction, but also in reality. Like that's something that you enjoy. I think that you may have made that clear in some of your
that was why I was brought into the Hoth versus Bane discussion with Evan's video anyway. We wanted my opinion on their mentalities on that level. Right.
Now, so I want to talk to you because this is your it would be like Snape and when he was talking he was dressing down Lupin. This is your area of expertise, is it not? But anyway, this is your area of fascination, if not expertise.
That would be a better way.
I want you to talk about. Sure. I want you to talk about, and certainly more so than me. Or I don't pretend to know much about tactics, or In fact, I want you to define the difference between tactics and strategy for me here now, if you would.
It's difficult because even the masters of both can't truly delineate between the two in a definitive sense. Strategy is the overall objective of a plan. What you're striving for. It's very goal oriented. Tactics is the implementation of the strategy and how you want to go about achieving the goals specifically. So, if, for example, my strategy is to go on the offense because I know your defense is weak in a Lite Vigil, for example. This is how I'm going to do that. I'm going to incorporate this sequence, followed by this sequence, followed by this leaping attack because I know your overhead is weak as well. The strategy is I'm going on the offense because, in my opinion, it's the best defense in this situation. The tactics are the step-by-step to how I achieve the end goal.
Now,
there's a lot of leeway in all different situations, but that's essentially the basics.
Fair enough. Now, when it comes to Hoth and his renown as a great general, Um, Clearly, he excelled in this field, and I'm not going to take that from him. Like, I have no intention of arguing with that notion. We got into this a little bit off camera, but even though I think you guys overestimated, or perhaps just never knew to begin with, the length of the war. This was not a decades-long war between the Army of Light and the Brotherhood of Darkness. The Brotherhood of Darkness was itself a fairly recent creation, to the point that most of the Sith Masters involved in it remembered operating in the traditional fashion, with all the Sith backstabbing each other. They did not grow up in this environment. It was a fairly new organization. The Army of Light was even newer. The Republic was fighting the Sith. As is often the case, it's the Sith versus the Republic, not the Sith versus the Jedi forces. The Sith are attacking the Republic territories. And the Sith were driving the Republic back. Once the Jedi got involved, once the Army of Light, based more or less an army of Jedi, controlled by General Hoth, got involved, they started turning the tide. So he is that without any. I don't need any firm feat for that. That accolade speaks greatly to his capabilities and his reputation. Like, he is clearly a great strategist and tactician. Mm-hmm. My question to you is, to what extent do you think that translates from coordinating large-scale battles and war strategies to a lightsaber duel?
Now, it's an interesting discussion, not just for this matchup, but in general, because a lot of people will make the same point. I'm not saying this is the point you're making, but broadly speaking, a lot of people will say because they're separate kind of contexts, they don't overlap in any way. And I completely agree, they don't have to. They don't necessarily intersect. The idea of being a great general, a great strategist, a great planner. Thrawn isn't a lightsaber specialist, for example. That's the extreme example, but you get my point. Right. But the reason
it's a good one though. Yeah, that helps prove the point.
Yeah. The reason it's relevant in certain circumstances, and certainly I think this one, is because Hoth is also known as a great battle master, a great lightsaber duelist. He's a proven field combatant. He's personally leading on the front. As a general, he has survived years of the war against the multitude of Sith, multitude of opponents. He's not the armchair general that stands back in the back of the Force. Now, the reason I think that's worth highlighting is because when you are the kind of strategic genius, tactical genius that you have to be to pull off the kind of success story that he did for so long throughout the war, that thinking cannot be separated from your combative approach, unless you're like someone who literally goes into savage mode when you're fighting. And I don't think anything we see from him speaks to that in combat mode. Not that we get any real feats. But he doesn't seem like the type of person who would just do that. He's very considered. He thinks his plans ahead. Look to him going into the cave to set off the bomb. He was leading his people calmly, even after he'd gone a bit off the deep end by that point. It was that kind of person. He doesn't seem to me the type of person who devotes himself purely to the physical side of combat and separates his cerebral kind of thinking. So the two come together, in my opinion, in that regard.
I guess I'm asking is, what is the major boon that he should be afforded in light of this reputation, if any?
The pairing of his experience and forethought and planning into his approach to combat. So he's looking at a combat. He's not seeing, I can use this strike to defeat that person. He's seeing, if I take out that person, that means this person's going to have an extra person fighting that one. And if I move here, the flank is going to be weakened here, which means my allies.
But see, this but this is a battle.
Yeah, of course. You're describing
a battle. I'm talking about personal combat. Just
in personal combat that applies to this on a smaller scale. So if I pressure this person here, he won't buckle, but it means that his focus will be focused here, which gives me a potential lead up to this side. It's not pure physical sequencing. If I use this sequence and then follow it by this sequence, this will happen. It's a case of I can pressure this point and get this reaction. I know that because I fought people like him 400 times back in the day, and I know this kind of method of thinking. Yeah. It limits. It like with the Force, and like Bane addresses in the book himself, the Force can help you narrow down the different possibilities and focus. But to get like the true foresight and visual of what's about to happen, you need the experience to back it up. And that, in my opinion, is like one of Hoth's greatest strengths.
I will give him that to me so far is a solid argument, and I will grant him a strategic and tactical advantage when it comes to personal combat over Darth Bane, at least with regard to the breadth of his experience. because I will not argue with the fact that Bane has far fewer confrontations under his belt.
Him specifically, it's one of his not weaknesses, but it's one of the greatest standing points about him. The fact that he achieved such heights with so few matches to his name. Whereas other Sith Lords were born of war or born of the rule of two, where they did almost nothing but specifically train to be stronger at all times. With Bane, he had other things to do. He wasn't dedicated to the personal prowess at all times, and he still managed to become one of the best of all time, which is why I think it's so impressive.
I will say, like you guys said in the video, and this is what I want to transition into next. So I've given Hoth the strategic and tactical advantage in an overall sense. Even though I do, before I move on to my next point, I want to say, you guys spoke about Hoth in this manner, but you didn't say any of the same for Bane. I mean, this is somebody who literally engineered the Sith and the Jedi basically to take themselves out.
For sure,
he is tactically astute.
For sure,
it's fine. It's fine with me that you don't think that pushes him over Hoth. But the fact that it doesn't come up for discussion mystifies me.
It was the biggest weakness of that discussion in the previous video, and it's one of the main reasons I wanted to have this one here. Because in this instance, in the video, I think I did mention that the original one, sorry, the Bane versus Hoth matchup in the first place.
The actual.
Yeah,
okay.
I think I referenced that point at least. I may be mistaken there, but I vaguely recall that. With regards to the chess match, I mentioned he was like the legendary master. He just hadn't played as many games as Bane or something along those lines. But yeah, you're absolutely right. In the last video, we didn't mention it, and again, it's the primary weakness of that discussion, I think.
And that's also the case here. I should have mentioned this in the when I set to set the stage for this. I should have mentioned this. You guys, Evan at least, framed. He said his motivation for bringing this up was that he wanted to better explain his position. Like to those who either disagreed with him or didn't know where he was coming from in his original video. I actually feel the original video did a better job of trying to explain that, even though I didn't agree with it. I think a worse job was done highlighting the differences between the two in the prior discussion.
Absolutely. It didn't help that we brought it up probably a bit too soon. We should have got familiar with the format before we dived into such a controversial and such a deep discussion, I think. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The execution was poor, I think, on all grounds. And I think Evan and Connor would agree with that if they were here as well. At least on that
perhaps
of the video.
We'll see. But I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see maybe when that comes up.
Yeah. But the next point that we're going to move into is experience. I want to take the lead on this one first, and then you feel free to respond. But the general idea was that because of Hoth's experience, he would have been prepared for anything that Bane is bringing to bear. Number one, in the most objective sense, and I wonder if you disagree with this, that is an assumption. Do you disagree with that?
Completely an assumption. Yeah.
Okay. So that's number one. That's the reason why I don't consider that an objective truth. I don't consider that necessarily even. I suppose it is probably. I can go as far as somebody accepting that that's the most likely outcome, at least with regard to the way that Bane conducts himself as a lightsaber duelist. But Bane was capable of. Let me back this up. Perhaps this doesn't make sense to you, and I can understand why to a degree, but at the same time, it's factual. After about a year and a half, however long he was there, of intensive training every night with Kasim, that stated in no uncertain terms to be the greatest blade master among the Sith of that era, possibly of all time. Personally, I doubt that, especially because even in the objective text, it's only said possibly of all time. And this is after we have, other Sith like Exar Kun and many others. But he is firmly stated to be the greatest Sith blade master of his era. And Bane pressures this man, wins the initial duel. Was he preparing for that specific fight? Yes. But so what? I mean, there's only so much preparation can do at that point. He is like contending with, and at one point overcoming, the greatest Sith blade master of the era.
Absolutely.
Why is that? Perhaps it wasn't in the discussion itself. This was hand waved.
Oh yeah,
Like a motherfucker.
yeah.
Okay,
Again,
like
it's
so
one of
I
those
mean,
points we should have brought up again. You will not have me defending the discussion as how it was presented. We've messed up on that level. Where I would jump in here is that while it's absolutely a huge feat to his advantage, and it's definitely something not to be shirked, it's one of the reasons that I completely understand and agree with his prowess on a base level. Even the lowest level of people lowballing Bane. I get why they put him as high as they do, despite that. But the thing that I would address there is the fact that, like you said, he'd specifically dueled Kasim for almost a year at that point. It was he had a complete intuitive understanding of that specific duelist's flow, his technique, his instincts, how he executes his sequences, and when he had the experience backed up with this specific Blade Master's quirks. And the fact that he's one of the best means that he's going to be versatile. The fact that he's heralded as high as he is means that this master is going to have taught Bane a great deal, and he can apply to other duelists in terms of, oh, you're doing this sequence, I've seen this before from a person who's much better than you. He has that going for him. But that's on the technical level. On the actual execution, every combatant is different. Even like the Grandmasters are all going to have their own personal, with rare exceptions, they're all going to have their own personal styles and applications. And he's specifically focused with Kasim.
But if every combatant is different, how can you say or believe that without question, apparently, Hoth has seen Bane before?
Because I don't mean precisely Bane, but he's seen many variations and many different types, and he's got a wide spectrum to draw from. Bane has just Kasim and the approaches that are similar smaller levels.
But if Kasim hadn't changed his weapon, he carries the ultimate weapon, all right? A saber staff that can split into dual blades, so you can wield both or one and put it back together again. If he hadn't switched weapons and styles, he would have lost.
Yeah, but my point is that Bane had been specifically training to defeat him. He'd specifically had all this entire wealth of experience backed up and knowing intuitively how to fight this person. And it speaks to Bane's strength. He is the type of person who is the plotter, the schemer, the planner, the underminer. He will approach the monolithic
but he was
stature, mastery, be it the Jedi Order, be it the Republic, whatever. He sees that and he's going to find a way to ruin it. That's who Bane is. That's kind of what his whole shtick is.
He actually wasn't training to beat Kasim.
But he had that experience backing him up. Sorry, is what I mean. He knew going into that exactly how Kasim was going to be acting. And the second Kasim did something he didn't expect and that was completely out of the breadth of his experience, he was like, oh, immediately backing up.
Yeah,
understandably,
but
that did happen.
But that's so extreme, especially because at this point he's only got like say a year and a half of experience. You guys are taking Darth Bane as of Dynasty of Evil, okay?
And the reason, and I think this one did come up at least minorly in the discussion actually, was that is also the same guy with like 5 extra duels under his belt on master level. Everything that comes from Bane's development as a combatant after that point is basically Carter training, which he takes to the ridiculous nth degree. Don't get me wrong, but it's still just Carter training.
But that's Mace Windu, Darth Sidious, like some of the greatest.
With the exception that they have thousands or at least hundreds of people to spar against, masters of all different styles, all different personal variants of developing their own techniques alongside, above, facing their betters, facing their inferiors, facing their equals, continuously all throughout different eras, and add a war on top of that. There's so much to work with there. It's variety and breadth of experience.
So your contention is what? That he didn't get any better? He stayed at the exact same level?
No, he
or
definitely
got worse?
Improved, but my point is that his limitation lied on the fact that he was forced to train purely with basically himself and Zana. He had Carter training backing him up. He didn't have anyone to spar against. He didn't have anyone to test his limits to, challenge his assumptions. It was purely working within his own mindset. It can be
Darth Vader, who had the full might of the Empire and limitless resources, often sparred with dueling droids. Darth Bane, again, had a lot of money.
Of course.
And you guys, you guys will extrapolate on the implications of what Hoth must have seen and done. But to be
fair, we said the same thing about Vader, I think, in the video, how he didn't have the experience that Malgus did, for example. He was confined to fighting his inferiors and droids. He had the same problem with being able to hone and expand on his repertoire. I think we did bring that one up at least. That point. It's a case of again, the fact I don't argue that Bane can be extremely good. It's just, to me, that, and again, this is where the speculation and perspective comes in, because as the book is written, I'm just objectively wrong. It doesn't affect Bane's skill. He's heralded as one of the best, but at that point of his life, it's mostly accolades. It's not he has the feats back up on occasion, but it's not like this massive wealth of experience that you compare with other masters, like, for example, Mace Windu.
But I mean, he's contending with the greatest known Sith Blade Master of the era, and would have killed him. You understand? Like it's in no uncertain terms that if Kasim hadn't changed his tactics so insanely, and again, Kasim ambushed Bane. Bane didn't he didn't spring that trap on Kasim. He was studying a Sith holocron, minding his business, crouched on the ground, and here comes the greatest Sith Blade Master, of the era.
Oh, again, you'll never get me lowball that feat. He was on point, and he proved his place among the greatest of all time.
So what I'm saying is there are characters for whom experience doesn't seem to matter as much because they are just that. Huh?
That's where I come into it. Like that's what I'm saying. That the as it's presented, you're absolutely right. There's no question that clearly it didn't affect him. But to me, from the personal, what I'm bringing to it from my perspective is that doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit the narrative of the way combat and even to a certain extent in the setting it works.
Why doesn't it make sense?
Because if you fought like 7 people that of your master level and in your entire life, and the rest of what you have to go on is fighting droids and practicing your own katas, you're intrinsically limited compared to someone who has fought like Mace Windu, for example, hundreds of thousands of different people with different levels, different styles, different approaches, different mentalities.
What if
all of this, like, you have faced so much more.
Take Mace Windu though. At most, there may have been, and not as a child, of course.
Of course, yeah.
But at most, there may have been 2 or 3 people that ever gave him legitimate competition or beat him in the dueling ring, and that's it. Mm-hmm. If you fought that many people who are already inferior to you, what is that experience really worth when it comes to establishing Bane's level of skill here?
Because he's people can be your inferiors and still teach you lessons in combat, like dramatically. So
why does he need them in this to overcome people that are around his level anyway?
Because they have that backing up as well. That's what I'm saying. That's why it's speculative. The idea that I can't recompense in my head the idea of someone who has decades of or at least years of experience fighting many more opponents on the battlefield and challenging themselves in personal combat against all these different types of people, heralded as a battle master, heralded as one of the greats of his era on top, as well as
okay. Take Battlemaster, for example. Sindralig was a Battlemaster. Of course,
that was a very different era. That's I think is acknowledged that it's a different kind of rank at that point. Back in the day, it meant more. At least that's my interpretation. But you're definitely right. Sindralig is not worthy of the Battlemaster title, in my opinion. He's an instructor. He has the technical knowledge. He doesn't have the personal prowess that someone like Mace or Shakti or Plo or Obi do. In fact, even though they're much more specialist.
Well, but I mean, don't you think it says something about the fact that in the next book, when everybody raves about who was really lighting up the Sith on that battlefield, it was Rasta. Mm-hmm. According to everybody, it wasn't.
I completely buy that, because again, as this is where everyone I think made a point about how they're very different components and not on their different level, and I think that was a miss. He didn't mean to state it as he did. Rashta is almost certainly a better duelist specific person, a duelist purely, but Hoth as an all rounder, I imagine, is more potent on the battlefield because of the package we're presented with him. He doesn't have the weakness that one blast of force energy will knock Rashta down as it's presented. That's why she has to go on the offense the entire time. Not so with Hoth. He doesn't have that gaping weakness, and also he's probably not taking the spotlight because he's Lord Hoth. That's his thing. He's Lord Hoth. They refer to him as the great leader of the Army of Light. Rasta is the person they look to when they're talking about battlefield specifics. The knight they see at the front line always taking names because she's not the Lord.
This war was so desperate, though, that if he really needed to go out there and kick ass and take names just for them to be able to make any sort of progress, he would have had to. This is a war. And the way that Farfalla and the others talk about Rasta, it sounds like she, if I remember correctly, she had objectively the biggest body count.
Yeah, that was throughout that war. I think it's mentioned that she has she's taken 20 lords out or something. I think something along those lines.
For every one one that the others did, I think it's something crazy.
Yeah, she's presented as the insane, duelist of her era, unmatched. But she's specifically heralded as a duelist. Against Bane, she would be particularly weak. If he brought the force to bear on her.
But my point is, she's spoken of in almost identical terms the way that Kasim is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, she is definitely the parallel to that. In the story, it's made clear that's the case.
And so my point is that if you've been training exclusively with somebody who's that dynamic and that versatile and that skilled, your skill set, even though Bane is like often billed as just like a Form 5 specialist, he has seen quite a lot.
Yeah.
Just the same the way that you, even though it's like in a much shorter time period than what Hoth would have been dealing with, it's like a crash course, like in a master class of like combat.
Absolutely, and that's what it is, though. It's a crash course. You're not going to be able to assimilate the years of experience
Yes,
that you
but
get from having that. And to
no,
just
but he
put
had
it,
that.
to make
But
this point as well.
he was already there. But he was already at a level that I contend he would stand with, like on the level. Maybe not in terms of, obviously not in terms of the years of experience, but he was already at a level where he definitely would have been able to contend with Hoth in Path of Destruction when he was in his late 20s.
Yeah, he'd be able to contend with him, definitely.
And you guys are not taking that version of the character.
No,
You're
we're taking
taking
later. But again, he hasn't had that many. That was the apex of his dueling training. He had experience beyond that, and he practiced beyond that, obviously. But that was the last time he really had his pure limits tested outside of the obelisk armor, if I recall correctly, at least.
Okay, but those are two different things.
Also,
those are two
before
different.
we move on as well, side point as well, because it just came up that I hadn't considered before. There's also the heavy likelihood that Lord Hoth has dueled extensively with Rasta. Which is something worth noting, because if Bane has the experience with Kasim, Lord Hoth's going to have the same with her.
If his legend, first of all, there's no, she wasn't his instructor though. So first of all, like that's completely 100% speculative.
Yeah, completely.
You know what I mean? Like,
but
the feats don't align. But even
definitely
if he
not
did,
on the same level. I just mean that he would have had access to that. At least a smaller amount of the kind of learning experience, is what I was saying.
But he wouldn't have necessitated that based on his years of experience, is what you're already saying. Like he doesn't need like I'm saying that.
I wouldn't say he'd apprentice under her and train for years. I'm just saying that he will have sparred with her extensively, so he's at least tested on that level. We know he's comfortable in that arena, or we can assume as much. I think anyway. Again, this is where it's coming heavily speculative. This is where the dividing lines start. Absolutely, I would never say this is a certainty. This is just where how I lean towards.
But in any case. I disagree with you saying that Bane's apex level dueling capped out early in his career. What we have there is the last time that he was pressured by a truly offensive duelist of or above his caliber. That doesn't mean that he capped out there. This is somebody who is almost completely self-taught in the sense that one can be. He learns all of like his greater knowledge about the Sith ways from holocrons that he collects over the years. He was an initial specialist in Form 5, trained an apprentice like exclusively in Form 3 to the level that she's a complete master, only outstripped by the likes of somebody like Kenobi, which is very insane. And he's also, as far as I know, he never picked up a double-bladed lightsaber, but he was able to instruct her based on his experience fighting one for a year and a half, like with like the galaxy's greatest living Sith blade master. You know what I'm saying? So he's a very quick study. He's got an eclectic, so I mean, it doesn't, and he himself used Surisu to the level, like, I mean, this is a much vaunted feat, but the fact that he could go out in a downpour and use Surisu to the point that he would never get wet aside from the beads of sweat on him.
No arguments from me on there, but this is a point where I think we need to address the idea that it's his story. There's a as I mentioned with the Plagueis discussion in the video, I find that the argument that the Sith feats are so much more heavily explored because it's almost entirely their focus story when they're taking center stage. With the Jedi, it's almost always an ensemble piece. They never get pure focus, pure like spotlight on their development as characters, and even when they do, there's not that as heavy focus on the combat side of things, because that's not what the authors tend to focus on with the light side, because that's not how the Jedi think. So I think
what I'm saying,
if it was Hoth's story, I don't see that level of feat is beyond like the great masters of the era. I don't see that as like this being this legendary feat that a lot of people do take it to be. Not that I'm saying but there are people who do.
It's a moot point in this discussion because I didn't bring it up to say that Hoth can't replicate that. I'm saying the fact that Bane can do that late in his life where that wasn't in his skill set before illustrates vast growth. So, and that's something that you guys did not account for in the. Again, you didn't use POD Bane. You used DOE, and it seems like there's no difference for all intents and purposes in your mind because he only fought 5 serious lightsaber duels.
That's probably because I herald him as like being extremely good back in the day of POD anyway. I see like his while he definitely grows, I completely agree, especially in the remits of the Force, because that's the focus of his growth as a character and as a person, as a Sith. But to me, that feat wasn't so far beyond what he was capable of in the past. Like, it was an improvement, it was a hefty step forward, but it wasn't like he went from middling knight level to a master, supreme master. It was, to me, master to greater master, if you know what I mean.
I understand that, but the problem here is that, and all power to you for that. Like, that's the proper way to view it. But the problem is that, okay, so we know what Bane can do. We know what he is capable of, and we know who he has already stood up to, Kasim. I'm not going to count Rasta, because to me, we can get into that later.
Circumstances for that one. You can't look at that as a case study.
Well, I do want to get into it because of a comment Evan made in your prior discussion, but we'll get into that later. It's a separate point completely. But so we know what he can do. We know he stood up to Kasim, pushed Kasim onto the back foot, killed Kasim eventually. But again, we'll get into that later. And this is key. He won the initial exchange of sabers. Yes, I know you're saying that he had a lot of experience with Kasim, and that's stated in the text to be an influencing factor in there, because he knew every sequence possible with the double-bladed lightsaber. He was that ready for it. My issue, though, is that you're saying that based on nothing but his status as a battle master, basically, that Hoth, in his years of experience, is in all likelihood better. Even though we saw that while Kasim may have been technically more proficient, he's by no means immune to what Bane can bring to the table.
Mm-hmm. I say
that point was not addressed anywhere. Like,
no, definitely not.
And I don't even think strongly in the original video.
I couldn't recall, because again, that wasn't the part of the video I was focusing on. I was on the strategic and tactical side, which is where I think that Hoth's main advantage comes from. By the way, I don't think that as a blade, if it was just purely turning their minds off, going to pure rage and blade work, I think it would be very, 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 very close. Probably Bane's game, purely on that level. To me, I give the advantage of Hoth based on his overall application of how he approaches combat. Bane, to me, is one of those characters that he truly shines when he's been given the prep work. His prep and his planning and his scheming and his that's kind of who he is as a combatant as well as a person for me.
Oh, but
that's why I think the experience factor for Hoth.
Can I ask you? I want to ask you a question. I want to ask you a question though. Like, wouldn't anyone feel more comfortable under circumstances like that?
Of course. Of course.
I mean, I'm going to force you to fight somebody.
Yeah, and as you said before, he was forced to fight Kasim in less than favorable circumstances. He was ambushed. But my point is, he had experience with Kasim. I don't mean like he although he can be taken by surprise. We've seen that in the story, out in more loose combat sense.
Absolutely. But I mean, he's been outsmarted. He's been outmaneuvered. I'm not saying he's perfect, but this idea that he can't think on his feet, that he requires that time.
He absolutely can think on his feet, but I think that his specialty when it comes to his kind of tactical and strategic thinking isn't in that area. It's the scheming. It's the laying down the foundations of a long-term plan.
And that's sort of my problem. That's my problem. Why does he need that? Because he borderline didn't against Kasim. If Kasim had stuck with the traditional weapon that he was familiar with, Kasim was about to lose. All experience aside, he had to change the nature of the engagement.
Absolutely, but my point
what I'm asking is, how come we're not entertaining the idea he could pressure Hoth in just the same way? Because that's not coming up.
Because Kasim, he had fought for years. He was familiar with Kasim. He had the flow. He knew the nuance.
Kasim is above Hoth. Like that's the implication. He's a more skilled than Hoth.
I know, but my point is that you can be a more skilled component and fight in a completely different way. Obviously, so if Kasim's coming at him in the same way he's come at him, which he was, because he was trying to lay up the or at least for part of it, he was trying to set up the surprise and have even more of an effect. Hoth is going to be fighting in a completely different way that Bane hasn't fought before. Which is to me a significant part of the equation, because
I mean, but if you don't know what that is.
That's why it's so heavily speculative. I'm going by the fact that he's had accolades laid on him that he has, and the years of experience he's had with the people he's had at his disposal. He had Rashta, for example, at his disposal to train with and spar against. He's being levied against these people. He's inferior to her, or these people refer to him as.
That last point you just mentioned was something you said in this discussion you hadn't thought of prior to now. So that's not always been part of your case.
No, but it's an example of why I'm getting the experience from. I didn't refer to Rashta specifically. I just said that he had sparred so many people was the point I was trying to make. Sorry. The fact that he has this wealth of opponents to have drawn experience from. You can be an inferior duelist and still surprise someone with an attack you hadn't considered before. I didn't expect that kick from you because I've never the master I fought and grew up with never used to do that. He was a master of blade work. He never used to employ physical combat.
I guess
that kind of thing.
But
the advantage of
what
having
I'm
multiple
saying,
masters comes into play here, rather than having.
But what
one...
I'm saying is okay. But I mean, what I'm saying is, kind of like, and this is a very loaded one, right? So forgive me.
No, that's fine.
But and again, it's loaded because there's a lot going on here. But Mace versus Sidious, which one has more experience as a duelist then? Like under just logic, it would be Mace.
Yeah.
It only compensates for so much because he's dealing with somebody who's more than he is, much more powerful in the Force, or significantly at any rate. And for this reason, he's at a disadvantage the whole fight. And that's, to me, what Bane definitely represented within not just the realm of lightsaber combat, but just throughout the Brotherhood in general.
Cool.
There was nobody that quite compared to him. And it's for that reason that logically speaking, he shouldn't be able to compete with Kasim. But he does. The same way that someone like Anakin Skywalker eventually competes and borderline outstrips somebody like Count Dooku. It's like this insane level of power.
Okay, hang on 1 second, sorry, because there are 2 points here. One, we'll address the Kasim one first. I don't think it's unreasonable after a year of experience to be able to consider that he couldn't take Kasim, because there's a difference between.
Well, I didn't follow that at all.
Sorry.
What did you like?
You said it doesn't really make sense that he can fight Kasim on this level without the growth, right?
You already said that. I was agreeing with one of your points.
No, that's what I mean. But my point is that I disagree with that almost, because his ability.
Yeah, but it's your point.
No, I'm saying.
Yes, it is.
No,
what are you saying?
I was saying
you've completely lost me.
Unless
you're changing, unless you're
I mean, as in like he's going up against Kasim, right? He's training with Kasim. He's getting better and better with him. He's getting more and more familiar with Kasim. So he's getting his baseline skill against anyone else is almost not irrelevant, but it's less relevant here because he's learning the nuances and tricks and habits and approaches and methods of Kasim. So his experience with Kasim is very high, but that doesn't translate.
What is it that you were saying? No, I'm asking you. What was it you were saying earlier, where you said I don't like that this is the case, but this is the way it is? Like when you're talking about like an experience differential. Like you this was only 20 minutes ago. I mean.
I don't like the idea that someone who has just the experience against the one person can then be considered to apply that against a breadth of others. To an extent, yes, but not to the extent where, because you can take out the greatest lightsaber duelist that ever was, or will be, not that he's that, but if it was, for example, you could then take out the second best of like all different eras and stuff, because the difference in approach and application and mindset is vast, and he wouldn't have had any lens to perceive that through. There's the different flavors of approach to combat, the different little tidbits that he's never encountered because he's only had this one person to go up against. And the other point,
is that?
The other point was the Sidious and Mace one you mentioned.
I told you not to. It's loaded.
No. I completely loaded. Of course, it's not direct comparison. I don't mean to make it sound like, but I take issue with Sidious being able to stand up saber wise to Mace for the same reason.
But he can.
He can. Yeah, and that's where I come back to one of my.
Yeah,
of course.
So how is that a point?
And that comes back to one of my original points early on in the episode. How the mindset I have going into this, what makes sense to me, heavily influences and informs my perspective of what I take from Hoth. What makes sense for me for Hoth. That's why there's such a difference in opinion between you and I think. Despite the fact that I recognise on paper, absolutely, you said it at the very start, he's nothing. Speculation-wise, it's all speculation, but the form that he takes in my mind is so different, I think, from yours, is because I have the idea that it makes no sense to me that someone with no interest, in Sidious's case, not Bane, no interest and no real personal characteristics that tie it to combat or anything. It doesn't make sense for Sidious to be one of the greatest lightsaber duelists of all time. He just should not be. It's bolstered by his ability to channel the dark side.
Yes, it is. But so what? I mean, that's the truth of it. Like, that's what happened.
Yeah, of course. And that's one of the reasons I disagree with it. But
I mean, it does make sense. It does make sense, though. It
makes sense in the sense that he's channeling the dark side, and the raw fury of that is fueling him and driving him, and because of the combination of all the two, that's why it makes it so powerful.
So my question is, because you don't like that dynamic when it's in play for subjective reasons, you deny that it has validity.
It definitely has validity with Bane. It's why I think Bane isn't outright ludicrous in his ability to perform the way the level he can. I just don't think personally when we have a ill-formed, pure speculation-based character like Hoth, to me it makes sense from my perspective to apply the reason to him. If you can't to Bane, at least apply it to Hoth and raise him up for that reason. Have it be the case of Mace style rather than Sidious in Hoth's case.
So you're saying because it didn't work out the way you would want it to in Mace's case.
No, not in terms of Mace losing. I just mean in terms of Mace's character. I like the fact that Mace makes sense as someone who is the greatest of his era. He enjoys combat. He's spent his entire life training against multitude of people. He developed his own style. It fits the character that he's one of the greatest combatants of not just his era but of all time. For someone like Sidious, that doesn't make sense to me. He's a politician. He has no ability to practice against or hone his skills with. He doesn't enjoy the pure saber side of things. It doesn't fit the whole.
But one of Mace's quotes, personal quotes, is that the answer to power is skill.
Yeah. Which is
he has to work hard.
Point, which comes back to one of my other points about Hoth, that he's not on the level of Bane as a Force user, but to me he is one of those people that levies skill against it, and he also has his own immense power to back it up.
Okay, good, yes, but and that's what I was going with before you derailed me with when you said that. Like you said something that just rattled me. I was like, "What are you talking about?" I'm making a concession that I'm agreeing with the part of your argument, and then things got derailed. But that point you just made, that Hoth is more skillful, and for that reason could compete with Bane's power. That's what I was trying to set up earlier. Okay, like that basic truth. But in instances like that, normally the default position is that the person with greater power is the one running the show, and the person with greater skill is the one working hard to be able to keep up. Now, yes, it says volumes about that Jedi who can compete with that level of power. It's a good mark in Hoth's favor. But what objectively tips the odds in his favor for you? What breaks that?
To me, it's
stalemate?
The combination of his experience and strategic and tactical planning, effectively. But
what good is experience when you? I mean, experience caps out in terms of usefulness at some point. It does. Yeah. Like, there's only so much that it can deal with or prepare you for, especially
if you're going against someone with weaker experience. I think it does.
It's not. That's ludicrous.
No, I don't mean that it actually does, but the relevance of the point is only a case of going up against someone with equal experience. Or if two people of extremely high level experience come close, it's not a huge factor. But if you've got someone with a massive amount and someone with a low amount, I think it's a heavy influence.
No. Everything you're just saying it leads into what is really my biggest point. Nowhere in that discussion did you guys talk about the disparity between their skills and level with the Force, or their level in terms of Force power. And that's that's the part that you've been sort of dancing around or whatever. Like I've been trying to lead it in this direction for a little while now. Hoth's experience is only going to be able to compensate for so much because of how strong Bane is in the Force.
Okay, I'm not disagreeing with this as a whole point, because he's definitely more powerful, and it's definitely going to be something he's struggling with. But what is Bane going to do to end the fight against Hoth with his Force powers?
I'm not writing the book.
I know. But I'm just saying, what's the definitive edge that his higher power gives him? What does Hoth have?
What does Hoth have that gives him any sort of advantage?
To me, it's the experience and strategy and stuff. And again, it's not like it's a done deal, but that's why I lean further in that.
But that's what I'm like. What are you talking about? Like, how can that be?
But because that's how
based on what evidence? You cannot just say based on experience, he wouldn't have much to deal with, or he wouldn't have much to worry about.
Oh, definitely wouldn't.
What's your reason?
I'm not saying he wouldn't have much to worry about. I'm just saying that I personally lean him in.
I want you to spell out what you're talking about. Like, you guys talked about this in very vague ways, and it doesn't fly for me.
Okay, to use the example, this is going to be where my argument falls flat on its face, given what we know of the source now. But the argument I made in the video, and I would stand by today if my interpretation is correct, but it looks like it's not now, as we'll get to in a second. The one feat we do have with him, where he's just casually takes apart the Sith initiate that is not as high as I was originally envisioning. The level of comfort that is expressed in that moment, from my interpretation, which, like I said, probably wrong now, but my mindset came from this route, is that hasn't really been shown in on the Jedi side of things in pretty much anything I can think of. He literally stands there in his moment of grief and distraction and just annihilates a initiate behind him. Now, as we said before we started this conversation and before we started recording, I've apparently been clearly misremembering that scene, because it's like a merc, not a Sith. initiate or Sith warrior.
It is
or
no
whatever.
Sith. It is no Sith Lord. It is at best a rank and file apprentice, and even that's pushing it because she's killed by one of her fellows wielding a vibroblade. So it's not even spelled out that she's a Force wielder, let alone somebody with a lightsaber.
And that's where my argument falls flat on its face, because I was interpreting it as more like Old Republic trailer, Malgus's grunts in the background kind of level was how I was envisioning it, which is obviously wrong. But my interpretation was that initially as I read it, it was that level, so it was more of a big deal to me. But if that's wrong, then that's just wrong. There's no argument for that.
Even if he did do that, even if let's say he did do that, it means he casually put somebody who was objectively weaker than him in the Force in a stasis field and let them die when somebody follow-through strike accidentally killed them. Good, that's fine, but that's literally it.
Yeah,
like as far as like, I mean, how does that Darth Bane and everybody knows he's got lightning. Everybody knows about physical augmentation. Everybody knows what he's capable of when he has like the Orbalisk armor on. His abilities, and again, because you're not using, I wouldn't really be arguing this if you guys had used Path of Destruction Bane, but you're talking about him at his zenith in Dynasty of Evil when he's a fully fledged Sith Lord with much more years of mastery in the dark side under his belt. I don't understand how is what Hoth did remotely comparable to his abilities with Force Drain, the scope of like his lightning, the fact that when he found himself unarmed and was about to be attacked by a lightsaber wielding Xana, he released like the dark side, like just pure dark side energies, creating like a cocoon to protect himself with that rebounded the two. I mean, there is nothing Hoth has done to make me think he can compete with this man in that field at all.
Okay, and I can completely understand that. Again, this is not something that I have 100% comfort in and say, yes, I'm absolutely right here. But my interpretation, again, I'm probably wrong now based on that feat, but that feat, the level of comfort he had in that moment on the battlefield and just complete disregard, he just casually just disassembled the battlefield behind him, not even paying attention while at his weakest state. That kind of mentality, this is just my first point, that kind of mentality bigs up the experience and the forethought kind of factor there, right? That is what he's bringing to combat. That's the kind of mindset this guy's bringing to any personal, physical himself combat, even at his lowest point. Then I look to the duel between Bane and Xana. Xana only won, of course, because of her illusions giving her time to then blast him with the one trick that she had that he couldn't counter, the sorcery. But the tendrils specifically. But if I put in my mind, if I put Hoth in her position there.
Wait a minute. Why did you bring that up? Oh, okay. Sorry.
That's
you're going somewhere.
Right. If I put Hoth in that situation in my mind, I don't see him. It could go either way, in my opinion. I just lean personally more to Hoth because of his battlefield comfort. But the thing that Xana is trying to avoid with her sorcery, I don't think Hoth would need the sorcery for. I feel like he could go toe to toe with Bane and clashing against the two, and then it would come down to who either outthinks the other person first or who gets the Force blast on them first. But I don't think the blasting of the Force is enough to bring Hoth down, personally. That kind of combatant. From what we've seen from other sorcerers or other...
Did I say... Okay. Did I say that it would?
No, but I'm just saying that's an example of why I don't think the power is as big a deal. The fact that he's the...
I think it's the biggest deal. That's what baffles me about the fact you guys didn't touch on this at all.
That's what I'm saying. What about his supreme power is going to bring him down then?
Because there is much more evidence that Bane can at least contend with Hoth as a lightsaber duelist. There's no evidence about Hoth being able to do the same in the realm of Force ability.
Of course,
none whatsoever.
For me.
And
by the kind of
all indications, I know, and all indications are though that even if he could compete with Bane as a lightsaber duelist, which is entirely speculative anyway, but even if he could, and again, you're using Sith Master Bane, there is nothing Hoth has done, been rumored to do, claimed to have done, stated, ascribed by any sort of anything, even just general reputation, that makes me think he can do that. Like none whatsoever. And the justification that you guys used is that, I believe, in the discussion, you guys made comments about the fact that while it's true that Bane was definitively more powerful than everybody else in the Brotherhood, that doesn't matter somehow because people generally underestimate those folks, and they would have been around Hoth's level. But if they were around Hoth's level and Bane was above them, Hoth is the one with an uphill battle on his hands, not Bane.
I agree. Yeah. I'm not sure I made that specific point in the video. I definitely didn't challenge it, but I'm not sure I was one
Well,
line. But
I
I agree,
can't
you're right
remember
there.
which of you said it. There are three of you.
Yeah.
But that point did come up.
Yeah. I don't know what relevance that has to this one at the moment. I agree. You're right there. It doesn't have any comparison. You know, I think they're definitely
the relevance it has in this discussion is that that's the only justification you guys used in the video.
Yeah,
I'm asking, do you have anything else, or
I mean.
do you have anything else, or are you out of gas?
That's what I mean. I don't think that example is what lends power to my argument in the video originally. That's what I'm saying. I don't personally provide personal stock into that one. But if I was going to say what I think they probably were going for, is that the idea that the lords of that brotherhood, even though weaker than Bane, are still enough to kind of prove a test of mettle for the Jedi in that battlefield, including Hoth. So that the fact that they're not going to be leagues below.
That's true.
Yeah. So
no, that's true. But Bane effortlessly humbled those folks, and so that's the point: is that he's higher.
Yeah.
You see?
Okay. So going back to his power level and his height above Hoth, if that's the case, to any degree that makes it clear and decisive, what about that is going to be the thing that brings Hoth down in the fight, in your opinion? I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying how would you visualize that?
I don't write verdicts the way you do, where there's a whole story involved and goes beat by beat.
The single trait there. What about his power is going to be the thing that gives him the edge? Is what I'm saying.
Because it's a very simple equation. Like when you base it on the evidence and not this headcanon, like upscaling of Hoth. Okay, well, like when you just look at what we objectively know, like based on what Bane has done and what we assume Hoth to be capable of. At worst, Bane can contend with him as a lightsaber duelist. Yeah?
Yeah.
Fair enough? Okay. I would imagine that he'd actually outstrip him, but I can't prove that. So I'll say, okay, so at worst, Bane can contend with him as a lightsaber duelist because he did the same to an objectively superior duelist in Kasim. All right? Why do I believe that? Because it's a Sith blade master, and you guys put a lot of emphasis on Hoth because he's a battle master. It's like I don't know how to break this down into any further components.
I get what you mean.
And then what breaks us off that stalemate is that Bane has demonstrated much greater skill and just raw power in the Force, and there is nothing that you're telling me to make me think that Hoth can contend with that. You're basically saying, well, how would it end? What does Bane have that would finish the Jedi off? What does the Jedi have?
Okay, well, this is what I mean. If you look at again the Varpowder instances at play there, but with Sidious versus Mace,
right?
Do you think that level of disparity is the difference between Hoth and Bane, or would you say that was probably a bigger gap?
No, there's probably around there. And the thing about that fight, which is a good example in this case, is because even though Mace legitimately disarmed Sidious, it's not like Sidious was helpless there. He was able to protect himself and retaliate with lightning, and it was lightning that was too powerful for Mace to handle beyond a certain point. If that had gone on longer,
so that's what I'm saying. You think like something like that, not necessarily that specific example, but the abilities manifesting on that level is what would give Hoth pause and eventually give Bane the edge. Some sort of display along those lines, paired with the fact that he can go toe to toe in a lightsaber duel. That's what I meant by as an example.
It's the most objective conclusion that I can reach based on the evidence. Yeah, I mean, if you're asking me a specific question like what ability does Bane have, I don't know which one he would need to finish him off, but all of them could.
See, that's the biggest, and I agree with that as a possibility. That's why I think it's so close, because I think the Force abilities give him such a powerful edge overall. But to me, again, it comes back to the whole the building blocks with which we're building our arguments, and I'm never going to argue that yours is more sound on the fact that you have the feats and the on-page stuff backing you up. I led this with saying that mine was pure speculation and was never going to stand up on like a yes, I'm right level. It's a case of maybe I could be right, depending on how you view the approach to combat and matchups.
So you're saying that despite everything I said, you still think the same thing. That's what you're saying in a fancy way.
Essentially, but I don't. But I want to emphasize. I don't think you're wrong. No. I want to emphasize. I don't think you're wrong.
Okay, but that's okay. Weak sauce. That's weak. If you don't think I'm wrong, but you're not changing your mind, there's something wrong there. Like there's something.
Because I'm acknowledging that the building blocks you're choosing to build your argument, if those are the blocks you choose to take, will are just better, and the
here's
answer
what I'm
to the
saying.
equation. But to me, with the whole speculative and more inclined to
Here's
go
my
with,
goal.
yeah.
I mentioned here's my goal, right? I mentioned this to you before we started the recording, so like the people don't know about this. It's not really been my goal to change your mind about who you think is more likely to win. I do question. I do wonder if based on the way that here, let me you know what, let me table that real quick and just make a quick point. This is my general philosophy, like about how I approach any of my matches, any of them, not just this one, just any matches. When there's a character, especially one that I like, okay, that I'm a fan of, and I pit them against somebody, and I have them lose, even if I want them to win, even if I want to say they're the superior one, even if I have a personal bias toward that character, I ask myself one question. If I was in charge of the council, right, and I was like doling out jobs, if I was like, I'm dispatching you to deal with this, do I honestly think that this person, would I place money on this bet? Would I bet with their life? Would I gamble their lives that they can handle this situation on their own? And that's my philosophy. Okay, I want to keep them alive, right? If I'm any kind of Jedi at all, like, you know, like I want to make sure that they come back alive. Am I sending them to their deaths or their probable death if I send them alone? That's my general philosophy. You have not proven to me that even you believe that Hoth could take this. It doesn't. What I guess what I'm saying is, you've come up with enough proofs, and so did the others. I mean, this is not even your video, right? But there's enough proofs going on that I can accept that Hoth can contend with Bane for a time, could give him a challenge, maybe even scrape a win or two on a statistical basis. But there is nothing you're saying that makes me think that it's probable that Hoth would win. Like, not one thing you've said tips the scale in that balance. And I just wonder, or off the balance into that that field. I wonder, do you honestly think that you're presenting the objective likelihood, or is it just what you want to be true?
A bit of a both, but this is the thing I want to focus on right now, right? Because this is part of what I'm saying. The things you're absolutely right. I don't agree that what I'm saying should convince you. I don't. It's not. It's a weak argument from most people's perspective. And I acknowledge that. I'm not saying that as like, oh, he's, you know, hairy fairy, get brush away kind of thing. As I said, the building blocks you're using to build your argument, the mindset you're coming from, being on what is presented and what is stated, and the acceptance of speculation, because you led with that, but not like the reliance or the focus on looking at what Hoth is or what Hoth should be based on the circumstances. Looking more on the Bane side, you're absolutely right. There's no question Bane is a strong opponent and Hoth is a risk, but he's not, a manageable one.
How come? But then how come that's not the view that you guys conclude with? Like,
the
is it
reason
that
I don't lean towards that in the end is because the things that you're bigging up Bane with the most are the factors like, you think, for example, Kasim being one of the greatest of the era, training him, and the fact that he can contend with him elevates him to this point for you. To me, the point is, while it's still extremely high, is lower in that regard. The experience.
But you're not explaining. But you're not explaining why it doesn't apply to Hoth. You're simply finding, you found yourself a solid little loophole where you can say, well, you can't say with certainty that elevates him to this point. It's only this point. But what's the evidence that Hoth can deal with even this point? You're not providing,
because to me, this is why I'm
you're
coming
poking,
for the speculation thing.
No, but here's the problem. And this is really why I'm asking you, why do you consider this the objective truth? And it sounds like you don't. But I mean, the objective likelihood is like my term for it. And you're not answering that question. So I'm sorry to come across like I'm being hard, but I told you I wasn't going to mince words with this.
It's fine.
But you are presenting, you're poking holes in my argument. You are not building one of your own. And that's the problem. That's the problem. That's the biggest problem. You're coming up with reasons why Hoth can contend with Bane, why Bane is perhaps maybe overrated, or why he's not as great as most people think. But you are not doing the more important work of building Hoth up as somebody I can buy, can deal with this. You're saying, well, he could.
Okay. I completely understand where you're coming from. Yep. And that was probably because of my focus on trying to defend Hoth, because he's the
And by the way,
prevailing weaker
when I say you, I meant the three of you on this matter. It's not all just you.
I can't speak for them, so I'm only going with my perspective here.
I know. Oh, I'm not asking you to. I'm just saying I don't blame you for this, or at least not in its entirety. I'm just saying this is the reason why I think literally nobody has been convinced by this in the comment section. You know what I mean?
The reason I'm doing it with the way I am with Hoth is because the mindset I'm coming from is, and the reason I'm bringing up Hoth in my mind where there is no evidence for it, for example, is again coming from my mindset in the first place. How to me it makes more prevailing sense that someone who is a battle master, someone who is focused on combat, someone who has had the experience against hundreds, if not thousands of people, someone who has been in battle for years, someone who has demonstrated such high level of comfort in his worst possible moment on the battlefield. The things we know about Hoth, those things that we can at least assume are likely, if not certain. That picture, the picture that is painted from that, which we can only go by loose speculation because we have nothing else. The picture that paints to me is more along the lines of the greats of other eras that we know do have feats backing them up.
Okay.
The intention behind
then
the
let me ask you that. Then let me ask you one thing. Based on that, your view of the character, Hoth versus Palpatine.
I haven't actually thought about that before, to be honest.
You have to.
To me, the difference there is that the gap between him and Hoth is much larger than the gap between Bane and Hoth. That's the key point there that I didn't get across immediately. Bane also has the ability to back up his saber skills as well.
How do you know that?
Pure speculation.
What is?
Also, the fact that the rule of two supposedly escalated. The power.
But what's your scope? Because it's like you don't. It's like you're challenging my notion that, well, how do you know that Bane's above Hoth? And now you're going, well, okay, clearly Sidious is above Hoth, because it's like, but you haven't fixed Hoth anywhere for me.
Like, I can't. It's like it's the whole. I have a loose painted picture.
No, and no one can. That's the reason why. That's the reason why I don't think if somebody's honest, they can come to the objective conclusion that it's likely that Hoth would beat Bane. Like there's no evidence. There's no.
I completely agree. Like I said,
reason to think so.
To me, though, it's a loosely painted picture, which is what makes this a weak argument to begin with. And I led with that at the start. I didn't think this was going to hold up, and it's not, obviously. But the reason I put stock in the loosely painted picture is because if it was a loosely painted picture with the feats of anyone of that type of any of the other eras, for example, not necessarily these would all compete or beat Bane, but Kyle-Katarn, Luke Skywalker, Jaina Solo, Mace Windu, Satele Shan, all of the greats of their respective eras. Though,
I can tell you right now that I don't think that everyone on that list would beat Bane.
I don't think so. I don't think so either. But my point is that I would put Hoth on that level, and other people I think would agree that those people could at least contend, potentially beat them.
And that's fine. That if your whole point was just, I believe that Hoth could contend with Bane. Yeah. But you guys are saying you're siding with him.
Yeah.
And I'm going, why?
To me, the thing that gives him the edge, though, is that, again, comes down to my personal, the way I analyze opponents based on more heavily to do with what they, again, it's kind of what they should be based on the logic presented. The whole fact that he doesn't have the experience to deal with the breadth of people that Hoth has done. He hasn't, the level he has reached to me, I don't buy compared to other people of his caliber, is what I'm trying to essentially get to here. Yes, it states a lot about Bane, and I completely agree, and it's not questionable on that level, but I don't buy it personally because of the steps that he had to get there, because of the reasons I've listed. The experience difference, the fact that he only had experience against the one person, even if that was one of the greatest blade masters of all time. It wasn't.
See what I said? You see what I'm saying is earlier. This is why you so confused me. Was I said to you, I can understand why you think it doesn't make sense for him to be at the level that he's at. And you go, I don't think that, but this is what we're talking about. This is what I meant to say. I mean
a good level.
You find this distasteful, and that's the only reason why you don't buy into it, is because it's not an idea that you enjoy. That's what you're telling me.
Yeah, but not because I don't like Bane as a character. Therefore, I don't think he's
that's
strong
fine.
enough. It's a case.
That doesn't matter.
To me,
you don't. And the reason, what I say is that the in-universe justification for this is, and he's not the only character like this, of course, is that some characters are so powerful that they don't need all that experience. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I fundamentally hate and disagree with as
Well,
a viewpoint. And to
you
me,
can disagree
Ian
with
in
the,
universe makes not much sense given the fact that how it's presented in
but
other characters. Other characters, not every character gets that. Oh, I'm more powerful, therefore I win, kind of thing. So the same treatment isn't levied out to every single character. It's
doesn't need
specific
to be.
characters that are either the main characters or specific people who need to be powerful and need to be the all-time bests. Yeah,
But it
that's what I'm
doesn't.
saying. And I agree,
Really,
it's a weak argument, and I would
you're
never say
arguing.
this holds up.
It's like you argue. It's like you're arguing reality, though. You know, like I
Yeah,
mean, let me give.
effectively.
Here's the trailer with Valen, the Emperor's
Hmm.
child, and she like crushes the guards around her. There's no way in hell that she has the experience advantage on anyone in anything. She's a kid,
Yeah.
okay? Yeah. But that massive amount of power swats aside experience in that case.
Of course, yeah,
And
but
I'm
that's a
saying,
much
and that's a
bigger.
common thing.
Yeah, but
I know,
that's a much
but
bigger
it doesn't matter.
disparity, is what I'm saying.
You're pettifogging the issue. That's a common thing. Like
Yeah.
throughout, it doesn't matter that that's a bigger example of that. I picked that because it illustrates my point.
No, but my point is
that
it doesn't.
dynamic is in play throughout within this setting in spades. It's like I didn't have to pull that out like way out of my ass
No,
to
I
find
know.
it.
But my
Like,
point is that
it's one of many examples.
if it's complete
And-
dwarfing, it's a difference than being not necessarily comparative, but the difference between the greatest level of
You're
masters
again,
of
you're
the Force.
pettifogging the issue.
No,
Who
I
said?
don't.
Who said? Why are you comparing that feat to like what does that matter?
Because
All I'm
what I'm saying,
establishing-
because the logic and the principle of someone being able to dwarf another person and take out them and bridge the gap in experience with overwhelming power, I get. But there's a difference between completely dwarfing and having a disparity between the best masters and almost the best masters. It's not the same. The experience factor isn't diminished as much by that smaller discrepancy. When you're dwarfing,
You're
then there's
saying-
little experience can do about it. Specifically as well when it's based purely on the Force and not lightsaber combat.
But you're saying
combat
the
in general.
obvious. You're just saying the obvious. That like if somebody's super duper powerful, they're obviously going to wipe the floor with somebody who's only powerful. If you have two people who are both super powerful and one's only a little more super powerful than the other, it shouldn't matter. That's basically what you just said,
Yeah.
just much more eloquently. But that's not. So what? Like I mean, all that I'm not saying that that's the reason Bane wins. I'm saying that's the reason why he doesn't require as much experience. I'm saying that makes
That's
up
my
for
point.
the
That's my point.
experience.
I fundamentally disagree with that because of what I just said. That the
You're wrong.
But
But I mean, you are wrong. It only makes up for so much. After a certain point, you're just arguing with the reality of the situation, like because you don't like it.
depending
like,
on the character, yeah. Like the experience, to me,
It's objectively true that this is the way it worked. Like the way he killed Cordis, for example. Like he did not catch Cordis by surprise. He did not trick Cordis into lowering his defenses. He ripped through them. Like a Sith master, and one of the older ones, had been for decades. Doesn't matter because he's that much more powerful than him. And when you have a character, when you have that dynamic in play, that character doesn't need to try as hard. That's just
I get that.
That's
but
the way it is.
But that's the bigger discrepancy between those two. To me, I don't see that that Hoth would be the person who could just be crushed in one hand, or like that's why I said. But how do you think the power level is going to manifest in the combat? What do you think is going to be the difference? What is going to be the ability that overwhelms Hoth in that instance? That's what I'm saying.
But why does that matter to you? Like, why is that question the one that you think needs answering?
Because to me, the size and the discrepancy between people in terms of their ability in the Force. It has to reach. There's a threshold it has to reach before experience is just removed. And for me, the discrepancy between Hoth and Bane isn't close to coming enough to just cast aside the strategic and experience.
Do you know what the discrepancy is?
Well, we don't. That's why it's so heavily speculative. That's my point.
But you said
no.
But you literally just said it's not. It's nowhere near close enough. Says who and why?
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's purely speculative. I can't prove that. That's why I said it's a loose image and it's a weak argument. That's what I've been saying all along. It's this.
No, but I mean, you're still holding to it. You still hold fast to it.
Put Satil Shan in his place.
No.
Well, as an example, because to me, that's why I said to me, Hoth stands among those types. I said before, Mace, Jaina, Kyle Katarn, Satil, off the top of my head.
Okay, but Satil does things that Mace cannot.
Yeah, and they're not all identical, but to me, they're all along the same sort of power scale. It's the difference between a warrior and a consular. The power
what
level
is your point?
The
I'm really asking you for what your point is. To me, I don't understand it.
While I can't prove it, because again, it's a weak argument. I've never denied that. The loose image I'm painting of Hoth, the place where I place him on the kind of pantheon of Jedi, is amongst those people, and those people if you agree with that, that's somewhere you can place them, would not have this massive power disparity against Bane. That's where
But their
that's how I
force
view
powers
it.
don't matter. Their force powers don't matter, is what you're saying?
They don't matter
Because there's
but-
no disparity.
No, they don't matter, but how it manifests is a lot less like overwhelming. It's not just a case of it, and it definitely isn't enough to just cast aside the experience.
You did Shakti
is what I'm
versus
saying.
Plo Koon. Who did you give the edge and why?
Plo, but I've really
Why?
double backed on that one in the time. If I did one of these, I'd say that I'm not sure about that matchup anymore, and it was even then I was close.
Didn't answer my question.
Because of the combative approaches of the two. Like I feel that Plo's approach very very minorly would prove the superior to Shakti's. Even if I would say, for the record, I would put Shakti as a superior combatant overall and capable of defeating more people than Plo is. If you put them against every person, every opponent you could possibly imagine, Shakti would fare better in like a one-on-one against every person that could have been.
What is
fought.
the ability that they have that you're putting one over the other? What's the ability?
The approach, the approach to combat. Plo is
I'm asking you. What's you see what you're doing? What I'm doing to you? Like you're doing it to me. You're like, well, what's the ability that breaks it?
Okay,
like,
so my point being is again, it's very close. It's not a decisive victory either way. But I lent at the time more towards Plo because his approach is something that is suited to taking on Shakti's highly aggressive acrobatic. Maneuvers. I say it better in the video that the fight is a case of Plo standing his ground, Shakti attacking, Plo batting her back, Shakti retreating, rinse repeat until one of them dies. The conclusion I came to is that Plo.
I think you missed the point. I think you missed the point of me bringing that up. I was giving you shit for asking me a dumb question.
But what dumb question did I ask?
What ability does Bane have that would take Hoth out? You keep asking me that one. It keeps coming back to that.
Yeah. But I just gave an explanation for why I think Plo would beat T slightly.
You didn't. You just said their approach. That's all you said. You didn't say anything specifically.
The incompatibility of the approach. So Shakti approaches, engages, falls back. The slugging match that would evolve to, she would expend more energy until Plo sees an opening and cut her down. I think that's the incompatibility between the two, very minorly so. Despite the fact that Shakti is an overall more combative opponent. Strategically speaking, Plo's MO is better suited to fighting Shakti's MO than hers is his. Is my mindset. Which is
so that's all you wanted from me. You just wanted me to talk like very vaguely about like how Bane would be.
This is why I say it's all speculative, isn't it? It's not like I never said it was clear cut, and I'm definitely right. And I would argue that based on the facts, you are more likely the correct one. I'm just saying from the perspective I'm coming from, the visual I have.
How can that be your stance? That you're telling me that I am objectively like more correct, but you don't agree with it. Because if this is the difference. If I'm right about Hoth in my mind, which I'm not saying I am. If I am, I think Hoth should be the person who would be superior to Bane in a one-on-one duel. That I'm not saying that is the case because I can't prove it because it's way too speculative and it's loose just painting on the wall. But that's so that's almost like saying that the least known character to you is like could be the most powerful. Because it's just your idea of them.
Yeah, but there's more definition to Hoth than that. I wouldn't say if you just had a name and one accolade, maybe. But Hoth has more. The traits surrounding Hoth, his intense intelligence, his experience factor, the way people talk about him, all that stuff, the connections he had, the people he could spar against, all the stuff I've mentioned in this video. That's what adds up to the picture of him that I paint. And it may be wrong. It most likely is wrong, and I will never argue that fact. But to me, if I'm right, I think it's at least worth acknowledging that it's possible that he could.
That's my whole idea. That what you just said is like, okay, so you're acknowledging that you're probably wrong, but you're not changing your opinion.
Yeah, because
I don't understand that. I don't understand
because I'm not coming into this saying that I'm going to play by the rules of looking at the feats alone. I always bring my own personal speculation and flavour of perspective on how combat works.
How is that? Yeah, but how is that what I did?
No, it's not what you did. No, you include speculation alone. But my point is that the oomph and the sheer driving power of your argument that completely, inarguably ruffle stomps mine is the fact that you have the hard evidence backing it up, on top of the speculation, which is all reasonable and rational by itself.
Yes, but that's the reason why. Okay, what is your goal with like the conclusion that you make? What is the point you're attempting to illustrate? That's actually what you believe is most likely to happen,
in my opinion,
or you're trying to illustrate that this could be the outcome.
My personal interpretation of the character, the conclusion of which is drawn for all the reasons I've given, based on my approach, based on my mentality, based on why I think what all the stuff we've talked about. My personal interpretation, that character, again, it's all opinion based, would beat Bane. If I'm wrong, which I acknowledge is most likely, then I would lose.
Then this is like a ridiculous
But
argument
you
then,
said you're never
because
going to try and convince me. Well, that wasn't the goal of the
um
discussion. It was just to
no,
understand each other's
it's
viewpoints.
but you well, did I fail or what? Like, no, that's not what I said. I didn't say I wanted to understand your viewpoint. I wanted to
Do you want
say
to address the
I
issues of
wanted
the
you
discussion
I
and
wanted to
explain
know
better?
if I wanted to know if I could convince you that my way of presenting the verdict is the more objectively sound. Like
Okay.
yours, you're basically saying, mm, if I stick to just the facts, um, it's clear this is the verdict. But if my headcanon is true and it may not be, this is the verdict. So I will still side with this. I'll
Okay.
place my bets on this.
Look at this.
And that makes no sense.
I'm saying from my perspective of the character, which is brought to with these examples and these reasons and this rationale,
No, but
this
the
is the
problem
case.
is, but here's the problem. Let's say that, and they're not here to speak for themselves, but let's say that that's the mentality that Connor and Evan both have. Well, we're not playing by the rules. We're playing by like what makes sense to us. You can't do that and then also argue with people's counterpoints as though they matter to you, like which you guys were doing. You brought up points of discussion in the prior video that outlined the reasons why you don't believe like Bane should have been given the edge. At the same time, you're now saying that in light of what I've brought to the table, the objective facts, headcanon still prevails. And that to me is why I just will never be on the same planet as you guys. I don't understand. There's like a cognitive dissonance in my head. I don't understand you could believe the two things.
Fair enough. I think it's important to say, as you said before, that I don't think Evan and Connor think the same way as I do on this one. I'm definitely a step apart from them. Connor, especially, always goes for the what makes sense and what's presented in the law, at least, or at least
Aside
myself
from
and
this
I do.
case.
But yeah, excuse me, sorry. I guess. But the to me, I don't see, if I'm acknowledging that factor from the start, and which I didn't in the video, I suppose that's again it's the weakness of the argument. Apologies, guys. If I'm acknowledging that now at the start of the video, or
Acknowledging
now,
what? No.
my perspective is coming from purely speculation, purely personal interpretation, rather than basing it in what is actually provably, demonstrably presented.
Okay.
Which I think I mentioned at the start. I can't remember though.
But why is that? Why is that a perspective more worthy of sharing than the objective likelihood?
Because the objective
This is the
likelihood
conclusion
can
you
so
go
often
with.
be wrong in canon, or acknowledged as wrong for many people. This is not one of those examples, but there will be
But
examples
that's
where
not. What is the point of the conclusion then? Like if you're not basing it on the statistical likelihood, you're basing it on what could be true. Like what is that?
well, statistical likelihood is essentially dealing with what could be true in its sense.
It's
But
not. Okay,
but
maybe that was poorly phrased. It's the difference between what's likely to be true and what just could be true. Like there is a difference between the
yeah,
two.
but what is
It's
likely
a
to
difference
true?
between
Of
possible and
course,
probable.
yeah.
Why are you picking? Why are you siding with the possible truth or with the possible outcome than the likely outcome?
Because
Like I don't
from my
understand that.
interpretation, if my interpretation is to be taken as the reality for the character is speculative as Hoth, then the probable is on my side, in my opinion. It's not demonstrably provable because it's
That's
way
not
too
the
close
question.
and it's way too loose. But that's the way I'm coming from. That's the mentality I'm going with. If I'm right about Hoth, I don't think it's unreasonable to say he is likely to be able to take out Bane.
So it makes sense it makes sense. It makes more sense to you to present that as the final conclusion than the mere possibility.
From my opinion, yeah, sure. It's only my opinion on the match and the characters and my interpretation of them.
I actually phrased that incorrectly. You know what the problem is? Is like you're conflating the issue with like something else. You're basically saying that that what I consider to be true, like that version of the character, basically doesn't exist because it doesn't fit with your
It's
idea
not my
of what it should
interpretation,
be.
yeah. Based on the analysis you've given and based on the interpretation that is presented and the consensus from most people, absolutely, you're absolutely right. There's no question. But like I said, it's purely it's whether or not you come at it from more the speculative, what you think ought to be, rather than what purely is on the paper side of things. And different
You don't think
characters,
one of
I fall in different places with different characters depending on how well executed I think the overall package of them is, comparatively and as characters, and both.
But you seem like a hardliner on other issues, like Obi-Wan versus Plagueis, for example. So, like, I mean,
I wouldn't say I
how
was a
come you?
hardliner on that one.
I I would. You said you had a fundamental disagreement with it because you didn't think he could compete as a force wielder, and you.
Yeah, but
I mean,
but my point is that I wasn't disagreeing with the points they're making about the strengths in the lightsaber style. If it was purely a lightsaber fight, I agree with them, which a lot of
it's
people
not.
wouldn't. No, I know
It
it's
wouldn't be
not,
a
but that's what I'm saying. That the reason I wouldn't call myself a hardliner in that instance is because I wouldn't discard the entire approach they were taking. I get the logic they were using. I disagree with the root of it, which is what we're
But what are
having
you?
effectively right now.
So, well, I don't understand. So, what information to you has the most validity when it comes to forming your interpreted version? Like, what is the information you use to arrive to those conclusions? If not,
My experience of the material, to the best of my abilities.
that's not what I know, but I mean, that's too general. I want you to explain why is your interpretation so wildly different from my own.
Because we see Hoth vastly differently, I suppose. And
That's not an answer.
The picture
That's the question I want to
so
answer. Why do
the
we do
picture
that?
I'm painting of Hoth, the paint I'm using, I guess, to use an analogy. I'm relying more heavily on speculation than what is actually presented in Newer. You're going with what you see.
No, you're not answering the question. What is the speculation based on? What are the statements in the lore that you use to build your speculation? Because you kind of ignore the stuff. You ignore the stuff that you don't care for.
The stuff that I've said, that the interpretation of people's opinion of Hoth, the presentation of him as a great general.
People, like, who are you talking about?
The Jedi. That they refer to him in ways, the Lord Hoth of the Army of Light, and they talk about how successful he was in the early years and how it was a betrayal that broke the lines, and all that. There's little pieces of information that build the character in my head. The fact that he went to war, how he did it, the people he rallied, how he managed to rally them, even though he failed at that later on when he was broken. At the start, they followed him. So those little pictures like that, they all add up and help paint the picture for me.
So you place a great deal of emphasis on the accolades stated within the universe,
yeah,
but you don't care so much about
with Hoth, to be honest. In general, I wouldn't take precedence over feats, but because I don't have anything else to go off with Hoth. It's just this instance. I'm only making this case for this instance of Hoth. It's not the same. I don't use the same brush for every character. It's what I have to work with, and how that manifests on my experience.
If that's the way that do you ignore anything in the lore? I'm grounding this in our discussion, like on Bane versus Hoth. Is there any you're basically saying that based on Hoth's reputation, he should be superior to Bane despite everything that we've seen Bane achieve, and because that's the version that you prefer to think of it as. That's the likely truth, or that's what I'm going to present as the likely truth. That's what you're saying?
Effectively. But again, it's a weak argument presented like that.
It is a very weak argument.
It's a weak argument, full stop. But
I think, and we've been going in this circle for a while. I just wanted to really spell out all the reasons why I don't think you guys make a very convincing argument, with respect to this issue, because. I mean, did you hear how you sound?
Yeah, I do. I completely agree. That's why I led with the fact that I don't think I'm gonna fall flat. I said at the start I'm gonna fall flat on my face. I completely agree with that.
It's really irksome. It's really irritating that you can agree that you have such a weak argument and not give any ground.
Because it's the weakness comes from the.
I know, but your interpretation. But your interpretation. Why does that remain resolute? Why doesn't that shift at all? Why is that the objective in your mind? Your interpretation.
Because the character, again, going back to the picture I'm painting of Hoth in my mind with all the little details. That
I know, but why?
Because that's the interpretation I took. The more little piece of information and how that.
It seems like
that character.
Seems like your
interpretation
never shifts, though.
How do you mean? I mean, it shifts based on what I read in the book and how I experience the character. That's how it formed in the first place. It's formed.
You just told me earlier today, okay? You told me that you had a higher opinion of him based on a misinterpretation of one of the feats. When I disproved that, you still but my interpretation of him is up here. And so it's what the fuck are you talking about is basically what I'm
saying. I said that in the discussion as well. If that feat if I'm massively overestimating that feat and it actually is just literally a merc with a pistol and that was it, and it wasn't a Sith warrior, Malgus's grunt level from the Republic trader style, then yeah, you're right. There's even less to go on, and I'm completely wrong, and my entire interpretation has been completely thrown out the window. But I don't know if that's the case. I mean, that's. It could go either way in the book, I guess.
So you really think it's just as likely that you're right
If
That's what you're saying?
if that's the case in the book, yeah, like the way I read that, it was more those. It was Sith acolytes, Sith low level Sith warriors, but there was still a pretty present, threat on the battlefield. I didn't read it as like this is a meaningless merc that has no place being anywhere near. Yeah, no, I didn't mean that he had any chance of beating Hoth. I don't, because it specifically states in the book that he's so far below and he's grabbing glory. But I just mean that could have been a warrior, a Sith warrior as well, to my eyes.
Well, but it wasn't. Like
if I'm wrong, then that's
it wasn't.
If that's the case, then I'm completely wrong. There's even in my painted picture is wrong. But I need to read the book again because again I'm going off memory of like years ago.
Okay, so basically you're telling me that you're not actually sure that you're right. You're just not sure that I am, and so you won't.
Well, no, I think
you will cling.
The stronger argument is yours.
You'll. But it doesn't matter to you because you're clinging to your interpretation of what he may be still until such time as you reread the book.
Yeah, if my perspective or my painting is accurately drawn from what we know of Hoth, then at least the potential of what I'm seeing could be better than Bane, is what I'm saying. And which is just again, it's a pathetic argument based said like that. But the character of Hoth for me, everything that I know about Hoth.
Why do you even want to hold to a pathetic argument? What drives you to cling to this pathetic argument?
Because it's attached to my appreciation of the character of Hoth. I genuinely enjoy Hoth as a combatant and the type of person he is and all that jazz connected to it. I don't mean that means he should beat Bane. I don't mean that at all. Because he could be a weak character and I would have no problem with it. But if it just happens to be that the feats that make him, in my mind, of the type of Jedi, the caliber of Jedi that could beat Bane, are so heavily tied to his character that if they're wrong, then I've misjudged him completely, and he's not the character
I don't want to put words in your mouth. You're saying that because it fits better with your idea of it, because those are the aspects of the character that you like, whether they exist or not. You hope that they're true, right? You're hoping that that's true.
Yeah,
because it contributes to you liking the character.
I'm not. That's not why I think that he win. I'm saying that I'm saying now, almost as beside the fact that I'm hoping I'm not horrifically wrong with everything I've said about Hoth thus far. I know it's not provable, but I'm hoping it's not like to the point where it's not even in question. If there is literally no possible way anyone could sanely visualize at least the idea of Hoth that I'm picturing in my head, regardless of how effective he'd be against Bane, then obviously I've no leg to stand on. I'm just saying I'm hoping that's not the case. I need to go back and read the book to reaffirm.
All right, guys. So we're going to be wrapping it up here soon, but I do have a quick question that I want to use to sort of ground this discussion in something, so that I have some kind of takeaway. I want to understand where Callan's coming from here, so I'm going to give him the opportunity to answer this next question. And it's really, even though I feel that I portrayed the case as strongly as I could, and why I think my case is the more objective, because it's based on what we know and not just what we think should make sense. And I'm sorry if I'm mischaracterizing your argument, but that is what it sounds like you're saying to me. That's what it sounds like you're saying to me anyway. But I do want to ask you though, what sorts of evidence have the most validity to you if in some circumstances, as you admit, you basically are adhering to your speculation based on what you think should be true as opposed to what we've been shown? Like, what evidence is the most compelling to you?
To me, it's the rational evidence, the stuff that I can personally explain based on, and that's why I should have used that term before, where I best come in with my perspective argument. To me, it makes no sense that Bane reaches the heights that he does, or not necessarily the heights, but the height specifically that he does, based on the limited amount of experience he has as a lightsaber duelist, for example. Just to focus on that for a second, like we did at the very start of this discussion. That was our first point. That is an example of evidence where, yes, it's presented. This is the case. Therefore, this is how he gets to this point. I said before, I don't buy that. It's not that I'm ignoring the facts and the fact that it's stated as such. It's just, to me, I don't buy that reality for the same reason I wouldn't if it was on the Jedi side. That's why, even though there's a far less substantial, in continuity base for my argument on Hoth, the rationale behind it and the logic of how the character and the character's progression and the combatant side of him works is built on logic that fits his scenario, fits his background, fits the type of character that he represents in the narrative, alongside other characters from separate eras. This is, to me, this loose painting I've kind of sloppily explained throughout this video, is something that makes sense to me, and to me that's the character he should be. And while I acknowledge that Bane, at the heights that he is not like a broken character, it makes sense as he's presented. I just don't think that the absolute height that he's taking to and saying he's one of the best of the best and so far above everyone else around him is justified, given what's presented in the narrative. Personally, that's the biggest thing for me, and I acknowledge that's
So are you
disregarding what is stated.
Are you saying that you don't like... Okay, that's almost too specific of an answer. I'm really asking, what drives you to look beyond the evidence and adhere to
in certain cases rather than others, like specifically here and not where I might just take it on face value elsewhere? Is that what you mean?
Right. Yeah. What's the point at which you draw that line where your headcanon becomes more relevant to the discussion than what we can verify?
It's a difficult question to answer, to be honest. It's why you said before I was poking holes in your argument with Bane, and more specifically in the presentation of Bane in the book, rather than focusing on Hoth and building up him on his side. Is for that same reason. I go this route when I perceive critical, not critical as in severe, but critical as in a critique, errors in the works. As of course that's my own opinion, and that's my my take on it. But that to me is all I can bring to an analysis. There's a consensus in the versus community as a large to take what is given and what is presented as fact and what is level playing field purely. And anything else is, like, say, headcanon. It's not relevant. It's not substantial.
It's not that it's.
And I acknowledge that to an extent. But to me, the speculation has so much higher prevalence.
But it's not that I'm saying speculation isn't relevant. I do it myself in every video. You do need to do it at some point. I wonder why you think it has more relevance than what we can verify, what we can see, and like what's stated about the characters. It seems to me.
Well, but perhaps this is the point then. The fact that there's nothing stating that Hoth isn't what I'm suspecting in the canon outright. The speculation. I'm not saying that you have to prove the negative. I'm just saying that the
I know this is so ironic after the whole Aunt Wu thing that you just said. I can't believe you just said that. I might say that, but I can't believe you would say that.
But that's the more the metaphysical in universe, like magical presence side of things with Wu. As a narrative point, the actual evidence presented is just taken from the character base. The rationale behind what I'm saying to me makes sense. It's not. There's not like an opposing thing that makes equal sense to me. Whereas with, for example, Aunt Wu, which we're not going into here because that would be a whole another 3 hours, as you know. There's an opposing viewpoint there isn't here in my eyes. That's where I come. That's what I'm saying here. I'm not disparaging other people's opinions, but to me, I'm not kind of in conflict over that.
That's the issue, though, with respect to this particular discussion that we were having. Is like, you're right. There's nothing in the lore that says that he can't win, but you're not saying he can win. You're saying, I believe he is more likely to.
Yeah, I didn't mean to say that there's nothing saying he couldn't win. Sorry, I meant to say there's nothing saying that the type of character that I'm visualizing isn't at least close, was what I was more leaning towards. Sorry, that's what I meant by the double negative thing. Or prove the negative thing. It's my interpretation of him, not specifically how he clashes against Bane. That would be even.
But it's almost like because you asked me many times throughout this discussion, what does Bane have that would finish Hoth off? Right? Mm-hmm. You asked me that multiple times. What does Hoth have that would finish Bane off? The answer is you don't really know because it's so speculative. Yeah, you just imagine it to be that. You just imagine that there's something he's got. That to me it's bizarre to me. I can't put myself. It's hard for me to believe that if you were a betting man, who's to say that you are? But let's just say that you are, right? If you were a betting man, that you would really take that bet. Like that's the bet you would. That's who you would place your money on. Is the complete unknown. That to me is crazy.
I can understand that for sure. The reason I said before about the specifically giving him an example of why Bane's power. What about Bane's superior force power? Not dwarfing power, but just superior power, which has to be acknowledged as likely, if nothing else. What about that manifests into giving him the edge is because it's a lot more specific an example. What can't Hoth defend against? Being, as I said, for using my argument, the type of caliber that he is, the type of opponent he is, he represents for Bane. How would Satele deal with it? How would Mace deal with it? How would Janus deal with it? That kind of argument.
Let's see. That's the thing.
That's
the thing. That's the thing. You can't know because we don't know what Hoth is capable of, and it's
precisely,
curious
which is
to me.
Why it's a weak argument on my end.
I know, but that's sort of my point. Is like, can this character even be used fairly in a series like this? The answer verges on no. Evan has made a video where he details characters that he doesn't believe are suitable for the Versus series because we don't know enough about them. It's weird to me that this character not only is suitable for the Versus series, but is also considered at a level that he can compete with one of the greatest Dark Lords of the Sith in the setting, like just in the realm of power. And also because there's not a single instance of him doing something to back that up.
And again, I get that. It just comes from the whole loose speculation side of things, where I'm talking about the general stuff that I could pull Hoth out of the situation and pluck one of the other people I mentioned and put him in the same situation. I'd see that fitting, if you know what I mean, in my head.
The difference is all of those people did something that we can verify.
Yeah, of course, and that's why again it's so loose and so. And we're going in circles. I completely agree with you that the argument isn't going to hold up in court. It's not holding up, as I said at the start. No. And I agree with that. It's just that I'm trying to explain where I'm coming from on it, why I have the view I have on Hoth specifically. I'm not saying that it holds up in like a
Really what I pressed you so much about, because again, your argument to me is more or less dead in the water. I never was swayed by the original video or anything you've said here today. Like, nothing about it makes me think, yeah, Hoth is likely to beat Bane. Like, nothing you've said has made me think that.
Put it this way, I wouldn't make the video.
No, listen. What I'm taking, I know you didn't make the video.
No, I mean, I wouldn't, is what I'm saying. So if that tells you anything about my argument, then that probably is the strongest point.
Well, that to me is, I think, what I've been looking for is whether or not that to me rings true. I don't want to imply that you've been dishonest or whatever the whole the whole talk, but it has been weird to me that you I'm just going to say it that way. It feels more honest, that you're saying, yeah, I probably wouldn't have made this video because there's only so much you can prove.
It's the question of saying, what are your thoughts on this, as opposed to what do you state is fact in a versus kind of thing. I can completely understand my.
Wait, maybe I gave you too much credit. Now you're saying that you haven't shifted at all in terms of what you think is objective. You just would have kept tight-lipped about it.
No. I mean, as in, my perspective isn't something that can fit the verses. I don't think that it would be right to say, and this is why I'm saying my argument now fully fails, because I shouldn't have opened my mouth at all in the previous discussion then. But someone asked you, what do you think about Hoth v Bane? You give them an answer. You don't say, well, the versus matchup, because of the laws of versus matchups and the way we have to take specific pieces of evidence and give this.
I do. What are you talking about? No, I disagree with you. You're saying that.
No. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying you don't give that response to someone asking you that question. Is what I'm saying. I wouldn't make that video, but I still completely believe what I'm saying about the results. But what I'm saying is my belief isn't built on an argument that can hold up. In the same way that it could for other characters. It's too loose, too speculative. Not necessarily wrong if I'm right about the speculation, but the basis for it is not widely held as a consensus and an accepted for matchup kind of criteria or presentation. If that makes any sense, I'm really bad at this.
It did not, and I'm just gonna say it that way.
I wouldn't make a matchup video about this, basically. I would answer the question if someone said, which someone did, what do you think about Hoth v Bane? I will say this because of this. But I wouldn't put it into the versus format because of all the reasons we've gone over now. It doesn't hold up through the accepted kind of formatting.
The only thing that you guys... The only statement that can really be said that I don't take issue with is that in all probability, given all we know about Hoth, it's likely to assume that he would be able to contend with Bane. There's no evidence or even, particularly cogent reason that you've even given, just based on speculation, to think that it goes any further than that for me. And that's basically what I pressed you for was I wanted to understand why you adhere to the speculation as opposed to the evidence. At first, I thought you answered the question. Now I'm not so sure. Now I'd have to go back and rewatch this to understand your rationale. Anyway, so yeah, y'all, had Grey Jedi been there last time, the episode would have been much longer for this reason. Hoth versus Bane all the way, like as far as I'm concerned, based on the evidence.
Let us know what you think in the comment section below. I do not expect backers on this one. I've never stated that. Well, I think I made it clear in this video that I don't think my argument is particularly strong or even remotely strong. But
I think
it's my
everyone
opinion.
Everyone needs to understand how brave Callan is, because he came into this knowing he didn't have much going for him in this argument, but he still argued. Apparently, and he still will to the death, because I haven't changed your mind on anything.
Okay. Well, again, I don't think my mind needed changing, because my mind wasn't opposed. I wasn't opposing your point. I was just saying that my personal view on the characters is different to yours, which is a different argument, arguably. Yeah. So that's this video, guys. Let us know what you think. God help me.
Great Jedi signing off.
Reti 4. I still don't have an outro. Goodbye. Oh God, I'm gonna be crucified.
You are gonna be crucified, but it's because the easiest way for you to avoid being crucified would have been for you to, like concede that you're probably wrong. But you didn't do that. You said, I said, look, these are the facts, and you said, well, yeah, you could be right, or yeah, instead of going straight up, yes, that's probably true, Matt. You said, I'm going to just keep on probably being wrong. And so here we are. Crucify away. Like, that's what I say to the audience.
Yeah. I'll take it.